Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to offer a very warm welcome to this development consultation forum relating to the Southleigh strategic site. My name is Councillor Nettie Shepherd and I am Deputy Leader of Havant Borough Council and I will be chairing this meeting tonight. Before we start, I would like to remind everyone in attendance about the format of this meeting. The meeting has been requested by Borough Homes to provide an opportunity for residents and the wider community to hear about their proposal for the Southleigh site and also gather feedback to inform their potential forthcoming planning application. To be clear, this meeting is not to determine any application or discuss any allocation in the emerging local plan. As per the Council's policy for DCF meetings, councillors will be asking questions at this meeting and I will be inviting them to do so later. Residents are very welcome here tonight to hear the presentation from Borough and the questions from councillors as their democratic representatives. All residents were encouraged to send in questions in advance to their local councillors in order to request for them to be addressed. We're also live streaming this meeting tonight so it can be viewed by those who are unable to be in the room. Feedback forms are available to all, whether you're present here tonight, and we encourage you to write down any views or questions on those forms. For those watching on the live stream, you are able to submit your feedback via an online form as well. All information relating to this DCF, including the presentation materials and details on how you can feedback, are available on our website at www.havant.gov.uk/DCF. Whilst we understand that this is an emotive and sensitive issue for many people here in the room today, we do ask that you refrain from interrupting and respect the individuals delivering their presentations and when asking and answering questions. Now, a couple of quick housekeeping rules before we get started. We are not expecting a fire drill this evening, so if the alarm sounds, please exit the room by the fire exits and leave the building via the staircase in the foyer. Staff will guide you to the muster point. Public toilets can be found in the foyer outside this room, opposite the Mayor's Parlour. Can I please ask that all mobile phones are now switched off or silent in airplane mode for the duration of this meeting? I'll give you a minute to do that. I mentioned earlier that this meeting is being live streamed. Please note the posters displayed around the room relating to filming and photography. Please note that permission to record does not extend to the public gallery and the rights of the members of the public attending will be respected. Finally, I would like to emphasise again that this is not the last opportunity for you as residents to have your say on the proposals which will be presented tonight. As and when a planning application is submitted for the site, normal procedures will be followed. That include a statutory consultation period that will allow you to provide feedback on the proposal. I would also highlight that any feedback provided here tonight will not be considered a response to that statutory consultation, which takes place on a planning application in the normal way. So you would need to respond separately at that stage if you so wish. A decision to approve or refuse any planning application made will be taken by the Council's Planning Committee, not tonight. Prior to hearing from the Borough Homes Development team regarding their proposals, I'd like to invite Paul Barton, our Head of Planning, to provide a quick overview of the forum process. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Very quickly, the agenda, which is displayed behind me, is the running order of events. After myself, it'll be my colleagues in the planning service. Two planning officers will set out the planning history of the Southleigh site and the development plan context within which any application would be considered. Then we'll move over to Borough Homes to present their proposals, and then there'll be three community groups giving their views on the proposals, followed by questions from councillors to Borough Homes. To reiterate some of what Councillor Shepherd has just said, the purpose today is to allow the developers to explain their proposals to you, to councillors, the public and key stakeholders at an early stage in the process, i.e. before any application has been considered. It is to allow councillors to ask questions, and the questions and those answers from them will inform our officers' discussions with the developer prior to an application being submitted, and help guide the discussions once that application has been submitted as well. It is also to make the developer aware of any issues coming out of the community and help them inform their application. What we are not here to do in this development consultation forum is negotiate the application in public. We're not committing councillors or the local planning authority to a view as to the appropriateness or otherwise of the development. We're not here to have objectors to it to frustrate the planning process, but we are to look to address it, and we will not necessarily address or identify all relevant needs and requirements that will need to be considered as an application moves forward. And this forum does not take the place of a normal planning application process or the role of the council's planning committee. In terms of outcomes of today, the developer will have a list of main points to consider as they move forward with their application. Stakeholders and the public will be aware of the proposals and those concerns that have been already expressed and identified. Councillors will be informed of the planning issues around this application, and officers will be better informed as to community expectations on this application as we negotiate with the developer. In terms of expectations on that, the focus today has to be on the development proposals presented by Borough Homes. To make it clear, we're not here to make a decision on the proposals. We do not have a planning application with which we can make a decision. But to reiterate what Councillor Shepherd has said, when we do receive an application, you will all have an opportunity to input that in the usual manner for planning applications, and to make representations either supporting or opposing the development as we move through the process to make a decision at planning committee. We're also not here to debate or consider local plan allocations. There are other means of doing that as the local plan will progress through its own process. And further points, council officers will not be commenting on Borough Homes presentation or those of the community representatives or any questions that are answered following councillor questions, although we may interject if there are matters of fact that we consider need to be corrected. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. We're now going to have an overview of the planning history and their planning policy from the planning team.
Thank you, Chair.
I think it might be the right position.
We'll do our best. I don't know whether you can hear me now. Is that okay? I will boom out. Thank you. Okay, so I just wanted to put up here the site location that we're talking about this evening. And as you can see, the site is outlined in red here, and it's located between Denvilles and Havant in the west and Emsworth in the east and also to the south. Just to get our bearings tonight, you can see Southleigh Road crosses the site between Denvilles and the road here, and Horndean Road, and then running north from that road up to Barton's Road is Eastleigh Road. To the south is the A27 in green here, and also in black the Portsmouth to Brighton railway line. To the north is Southleigh Park House, which is a Grade 2 listed building in that area. And the site, as you can see, bounds partly to the east and the west existing residential development in Denvilles and in Emsworth. There are also a small number of dwellings within the centre of the area, not obviously within the application site should that come forward, but those are residential properties. And there's also residential properties close to Southleigh Farm, which is also used for business purposes in some of the buildings on the farm. Generally, the land slopes gently from north to south across the site. And you can see here, just maybe able to pick out the blue lines, there are several watercourses which generally follow field boundaries. And again, because of the slope of the land, tend to fall towards the south. Moving now to an aerial photograph, and the reason for this one is to pick up some of the land uses on the site. You can see here arable fields which have been ploughed in brown, and there's a fairly extensive across the site, those arable fields. There are also small pockets of woodland, particularly here and to the northern part of the site, and significant areas of landscape grassland with significant trees, fairly large trees to the south of Southleigh House here. Turning now to the planning history. There have been no planning applications for a comprehensive redevelopment of this area of land in the past, so this is a fresh proposal. There have, however, been a number of individual residential developments located around the periphery of the site, and we'll see a plan of those in a moment. They include to the north and south of Barton's Road, east of Denvilles, west of Horndean Road, the conversion of Southleigh Park House itself and development to the south and west of the house, and development south of the railway line, including a current planning application undetermined at the moment on land east of St George's Avenue. So if we just look at those sites, you can see here the sites highlighted have been granted over the probably 10 years plus around the edge of the site we're looking at tonight. And you can see in the northern side, developments north and south of Barton's Road, residential developments. There's also a care home here east of Helmsley House. There's Southleigh Park House, which I mentioned, that's a listed building, Grade 2 listed building, which has permission to be converted to residential and residential development around that building. To the west, a little bit older, some of this development, the development at Manor Farm and Copses Nursery for residential development here. And south of the railway line, I mentioned the current application in orange there, slightly different colour. Hopefully you can pick that out, which is a current planning application for residential development, and also a development here for land east of Castle Avenue. To the east on the Emsworth side is land to the west of Horndean Road, which is being built for residential development, and there's other pockets of development that have been granted along that eastern side. We'll now move on to the planning policy background with David Hayward, Strategic Planning Manager. Thank you.
Good evening all. So in terms of the principal development on any site, it is always correct to start with the relevant regulations and the National Planning Policy Framework. And the National Planning Policy Framework, or the NPPF, sets out that planning law requires that applications for planning permission be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The National Planning Policy Framework must be taken into account and is a material consideration in planning decisions. So what is the development plan? The two principal plans which make it up and contain the policies that are sort of relevant to this site is the core strategy and the allocations plan. The Emsworth Neighbourhood Plan covers essentially the southeastern quadrant of the Southleigh area. The Hampshire Minerals and Waste Plan is part of the development plan, but a little less relevant. There are other material considerations, as it said, the NPPF. Government are in the process of updating the NPPF, and that would represent quite a substantial change in national policy. There are a number of what we call supplementary planning documents which contain more guidance on for developers, and particularly pertinent to those relating to parking and design. And there is an emerging local plan, the Building a Better Future plan, that has minimal weight at this stage in its preparation, but as time moves on and procedurally it moves on, it may well attract further weight at the point that any planning application is determined by the planning committee. So it's also relevant to perhaps go through the sort of story and a little bit of potted history as to how and why we're here, so to speak, because whilst the site is not allocated in either the core strategy or the allocations plan, it has been identified as a potential development site for quite a few years at this point. First of all, in 2016, the council published a local plan housing statement, and that document essentially ruled out any continued piecemeal development of the site. As David highlighted, there had been quite a bit of development around the edge of what could be considered Southleigh at that point. With funding from government, the council then undertook master planning workshops in 2017. I'm sure a lot of you were there for those, and published a master plan coming out of that to support the emerging local plan. There was then a proposed allocation in that local plan, which was examined in 2021, and that was for 2,100 homes. That plan was then withdrawn early in 2022. The council continued to identify the site for comprehensive development in the housing delivery position statement at that point. The site was also then highlighted a little later in 2022 as a significant site for development in the first consultation on the new emerging local plan, the Building a Better Future plan. And then, I nearly said this year still, sorry. Last year, the draft Building a Better Future plan proposed an allocation for at least 2,100 homes on the Southleigh site. So the current policy status essentially today, the site is not allocated for development in the development plan and is outside the urban area identified in those plans. The site has been identified in several draft local plans and planning strategies in the past decade or so. However, particularly turning to the emerging local plan, at this point, it does have only minimal weight in making planning decisions. As I said, though, as sort of time goes on, as procedurally that plan goes on, that may well change. There is a clear need for housing. Government have required us through the NPPF to have a rolling 5-year supply of housing. That has been an element of the NPPF that has been in place for many, many years at this point. Currently, the housing supply position in the borough is 1.6 years, so that is very obviously notably below where it should be. And that is a material consideration of substantial weight, and appeal inspectors have allowed schemes to go ahead, including in this borough. So the other element is, so the Building a Better Future plan may attract more weight as time moves on and as it moves forward procedurally. And as I highlighted, the National Planning Policy Framework is in the process of being updated by government as well. And that significantly includes national decision-making policies. Government highlight through the current consultation on the NPPF that when the final NPPF is published, those national decision-making policies attract weight in making planning decisions. And if there is conflict between any policies, essentially in the core strategy or the allocations plan, and the new national planning policy framework, the new planning policy framework has the greater weight. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you to our planning team for their presentation. I'd like to now invite Borough Homes team to do their presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I'll use the mic because we'll pass it between the members of the team, if that's okay. So thank you and welcome. Thank you for coming this evening. We're delighted to see so many people attending this important event. We recognise the level of public interest in this important proposal, and we're genuinely pleased to be engaging in events such as this to listen to your views. So please do use the feedback forms. We'll receive redacted versions of those, and we can then reflect and review your feedback as we move forward through our draft proposals. So thank you for coming. In terms of introductions, I'm Rebecca Fentrip. I'm Planning Director for Borough Homes. I'm joined on my right by James Matcham, who's Strategic Land Director at Borough. You will have seen us at the previous public exhibitions, along with Adam Rickenbach, who's Project Director, also from Borough Homes. In terms of the project team, I'm joined by Max Law, who's from Stantec. He is here from a transport and highways perspective. Next to Max is Barry Williams, who's a master planner from Stantec and has supported us on the master planning element of the proposals we're presenting this evening. Next to Barry is Steve Jolly. He is our communications team and he supported us on the engagement events that we've held to date that he will run you through. And on the end is Chris Jack, who's an ecologist from EPR, who's undertaken our ecological surveys to date and has a good understanding of the ecological considerations of the site. In terms of Borough Homes, for those that don't know anything about Borough, we are one of the largest private house builders. John Borough is still very much at the helm of the business. We hold a 5-star HBF rating, which we hold dear as a reputable house builder. That is based on customer satisfaction surveys. So it's very important to us to maintain that status moving forward. We're about reputation and quality ultimately, and that's why we're keen to engage with the public through events such as this. In terms of the purpose of the presentation this evening, we'd like to present our proposals to you. They are very much proposals, as has been explained. This is not a formal planning application. You will have a future opportunity to engage in that process through the statutory mechanisms. So they're draft, they're evolving, and we will reflect on the comments we receive. In terms of the actual slides, I'll talk a bit about the site, the policy background as it's evolving, the opportunities and the constraints that we're aware of, and then ultimately our policies in terms of priorities and vision for the site, which Barry will take us through. Could I have the next slide, please? This slide shows the extent of Borough Homes' interest. So we control about 85% of the emerging allocation, not the entire allocation, but critically we will need to comprehensively master plan so we don't fetter the ability for the balance of the allocation should it come forward to be delivered in future. And that's a critical piece. We recognise the concerns in terms of infrastructure and transport critically, and we'll be reflecting, I'm sure we'll have questions on some of those key elements this evening. This is a major site. It's going to take some time to be delivered. It will be multi-phased and it won't be delivered in one go. It will come forward over a number of years, and that's something I'll touch on towards the end of the presentation. Could I have the next slide, please? In terms of the emerging policy, I won't dwell on the details of this slide. You'll be familiar with the consultation as David has talked us through in terms of where the council is taking their local plan and their emerging policies. What's key here is this is not just about housing. This is about the other facilities that will come forward alongside the housing, sorry. A fundamental part of that is community park, the local centre, potential GP services, etc. All of that would be set out in our outline submission. It's more than just the homes, it's the infrastructure as well and how that is delivered alongside the homes. I'm now going to pass you over to Steve Jolly, who's going to talk to you about the engagement that we've undertaken to date.
Thank you. If I could have the next slide, please. So as Rebecca said, my name's Steve Jolly. I work for a company called Marengo, and we've been taken on by Borough Homes to help manage the consultation and engagement process, both from the outset and all the way through the planning process. So I'm not going to cover there was an extensive previous engagement on the site around the previous allocation and the previous withdrawn local plan. But as that's been covered, that happened and was quite extensive previously. I'm going to focus more on the consultation that we've carried out as a result of the planning applications. So there were some workshops with Havant Borough Council officers on a thematic basis to cover a number of different areas, whether transport, landscape and the like. And then in the summer, we held 2 engagement events, one in Havant, one in Emsworth, where around 550 residents attended. Following, we sent out about 3,200 odd invites, newsletters to the local community. From that, we received 227 pieces of feedback. which covered a whole wild gamut of information. That, and then crucially, the feedback received from this evening will go into what's known as a statement of community involvement. So that will form part of the planning application, where we'll outline, this is the consultation that we undertook in detail. This is the feedback that we've received as a result of the consultation. And then this is Bloorhome's response to that feedback and how that has helped develop the master plan. So it's really important, as Rebecca said, please do take the time to fill in the feedback forms this evening. It's incredibly useful. We'll also be making, of course, copious notes, but it's our job to take all that feedback on board, put it in a document that will be publicly available at the time of the planning application, so everyone can see the journey that we've taken through the development process. Okay, if I could have the next slide, please.
Right, thanks, Steve. Can you hear me okay? Everybody there, brilliant, fantastic. Okay, I get to talk about the nice things, I hope. Starting off with vision. I think what we're really determined to do, I think, and achieve at Southleigh is a fantastic addition to this area, with new homes, schools, shops, health facilities, a place that's really attractive to look at and in keeping with the local area. And mostly, I think, has lots and lots of new open spaces and landscaped areas, not just for the residents of this site, but for everyone in this room and their families to use and enjoy. That's where we're trying to get to as a vision, a picture, if you like, of the future. So that's the reason we thought it was really important to put up this image, which is looking from the northeast to the southwest towards Warblington Station. And what we hope this does is illustrate, I suppose, the quality of the vision that we're trying to create and the sort of place we're trying to create, founded on three pretty simple principles. One is trying to create a green place, retaining and celebrating much of that existing planting and woodland that you can see on screen, significantly adding to that with areas of open space, the best of which will be in the foreground of this image, a new community parkland, which is a significant part of our development, not just for residents, but for others, with children's play areas, with informal cycle routes, areas for wildlife. My own hope is a kiosk where you can get coffee. I'm not sure I could survive a walk around the park without that, but that's just me. But also not forgetting some of those sustainability credentials that we often talk about, which is about the provision of community facilities, schools, shops, all those things that are within easy walking distance that we should be walking and cycling to. A focus on cycling and walking as safe ways of getting around this site. Quite often we think about the car first. We're probably getting to a point where we need to think about walking and cycling as a way of getting around if we can, and also about energy provision. Each of these homes will have PVs, will have EV charging, air source heat pumps, whatever the technology is that we need to align to around government policy. The last two, connected and distinctive. The point about connected, I think, is that the real objective here is that everyone benefits from the new facilities, the services, the attractions that this site will bring. And for that to happen, that needs to be linked to some of those surrounding areas. And those links need to be safe, they need to be easy, and they need to be sustainable. So that's where we're trying to go. We want this place to be distinctive, the physical links I've just talked about, buildings that reflect some of the local materials and the scale of this area means it's going to be in keeping, but we think it's going to be a little bit different just by the level of planting and landscaping I've talked about, the how we treat streets and open spaces, the abundance of local facilities that will be modern, fit for purpose, and interesting parts like the farmyard area you can see in the center of that graphic, which is a place we want to retain and be part of a development we think will be special and have its own character. Now the next slide, please. So how did we develop this vision? Well, Over the course of the last year or two, we've undertaken a depth and significant breadth of technical survey work and analysis across all those headings that you can see on that slide. And in addition, I think was mentioned a bit earlier, we've had multiple workshops and meetings with planning officers and council officers just to ensure that we have a complete picture of the challenges and considerations that this site brings. And the reason we do that is really for two reasons. There are two objectives behind that. One is what we're really interested in is determining the assets, the physical assets of a place like this, and those unique qualities that end up bringing about a unique vision. And that's really about concentrating on what we want to retain, what we want to enhance, and most importantly, what we want to celebrate. And you can see if you look at that image, some of those light green areas are the existing areas of planting and woodland. That's just the sort of thing we want to retain and work with to create a place that is more unique and it is special. But as well as that, we're trying to continue to build this picture of where it's appropriate to develop and where it's not appropriate to develop. So, for example, it wouldn't be appropriate to develop in that northeastern area. That's the historic parkland. And the setting it provides to the listed building at Southleigh Park House. That's a really important part of the site that we want to retain as open space. And we wouldn't build on areas prone to flooding. You can see down in the southeast corner, that area of blue, dark blue and light blue. That's the current extent of the flood zone. And of course, we wouldn't want to develop on any parts of the site that we are dependent on water management and drainage, which are some of those lighter blue areas you can see on the plan. But I suppose ultimately the most important thing for us is to understand how this site works so that we're able to sensitively place development in the right places. Next slide. Over to Max.
Good evening. Hope you can all hear me well. I'd just like to start off by saying that we are very aware that existing congestion and delays are a big issue for local residents. We have worked up a series of proposals that will help manage the extra traffic generated from the development, and we've discussed these with Hampshire County Council as the local highway authority, and they have informed the development of the design. These proposals will be formally reviewed following the submission of the application. One key aim of the proposals is to reduce the traffic generated from the site in the first place, this being a requirement of both national and county policy and is embedded into Havant's draft local plan policy that will reflect longer term changes in travel behaviour and subsequently reduced carbon impact. The streets of Southleigh development itself are being designed to be safe for all users with low traffic speeds that will encourage more walking and cycling where available. Beyond the development's constraints, the speed limits are proposed to be reduced on Southleigh Road, Horndean Road and Eastleigh Road that will emphasise safety and connectivity for pedestrians and cyclists along these roads, as well as the wider individuals. A series of safe pedestrian and cycle routes that are separated from the streetscape itself have been designed to make it easier and more direct to travel through the development without needing to use the car. These will link through the whole development and be usable by residents of the development themselves, as well as local residents beyond that in Denvilles and Emsworth. Places for cycles, e-bikes, car clubs and scooters are to be provided at main bus stops, mobility hubs and the local centre itself to encourage these forms of movement. For longer distance trips and those unable to walk and cycling, a new bus service will run through the site that links Emsworth to Havant Town Centre, also routing up towards Barton's Road, where there is currently no bus service available, and we're aware that previous development has come forward without this. This new bus service will benefit the residents of Southleigh, as well as businesses along the route and along with existing residents of the local area. The existing 27 service that runs along Southleigh Road between Emsworth and Havant is to be improved as and to provide a more frequent bus service throughout the day, not just its infrequent provision that it currently has. Again, benefiting the existing residents as well as residents of Southleigh itself. Now, junction capacity and safety improvements will also be proposed, this being along Horndean Road, at Southleigh Road and up at Bartons Road, as well as on Bartons Road itself with the junction with Eastleigh Road. These improvements will include signalisations as well as prioritising pedestrian and cycle movements and better facilitating these kind of movements. A comprehensive series of surveys has been undertaken to inform our development proposals, along with detailed technical assessments to forecast the impacts on the local highway network. We're in the process of working through these proposals with Hampshire County Council as the local highway authority, and these will be submitted as part of the formal application. All these proposals come as the full transport package that will reflect the vision for the Southleigh site 15 years into the future. Next slide.
So the landscape strategy derives from the technical work that Barry's given us an overview of, including the various forms of ecological survey we've carried out to identify and understand the important features for wildlife within and around the site. Foremost of these is the old ornamental parkland landscape in the northeastern quadrant, with its really impressive collection of old and veteran oak trees. So this would become quite a substantial new resource of publicly accessible green space in the form of the new community park. Would also be targeted for various biodiversity enhancements, such as providing new areas of wildflower-rich grassland, wetland features, planting future generations of veteran trees. To the south of Southleigh Road, we have strong wetland habitat corridor extending along the eastern edge of the site, and this is at least 50 metres at its narrowest point. And this would be a mosaic of semi-natural habitats which would complement the existing wetland character of the adjacent Westbrook stream, and would also respond to conservation priorities identified in the local nature recovery strategy. So together with a community park, this corridor will allow us to really link up the key biodiversity assets in the landscape, extending from Southleigh Forest in the north to the Southleigh Parkland, the Westbrook Stream corridor, and down to a couple of locally designated sites of importance for nature conservation, which lie just off site to the southeast. There are, as we've heard, other existing pockets of semi-natural vegetation around the site, such as the wooded copse at the very northern end of Bartons Road. These will also be enhanced and linked together within the green space network, which will also include green walking routes through the residential areas and community focal points such as the orchard in the north and play areas. Next slide, please.
Right, back to me. Okay, right. So emerging master plan. So when we put the three themes together, the vision themes, along with the transport proposals that Max talked about, the landscape and water management proposals that Chris talked about, we end up with what we would call a master plan. We've covered quite a lot of this already in Max's explanation and Chris's explanation, but about landscape and transport there. But there are important parts of this plan that we haven't talked about at all. So I think this is probably the time to do that. And I'd also like to do what we call a sort of day in the life. And you'll have to bear with me when I do this. We have to kind of imagine what it's going to be living like at Southleigh, and we'll go on a journey on that. But first of all, I think it's worth just focusing on the two or three things that are on this plan that we haven't mentioned yet. The first is the local centre, which sits to the west of the plan. Hopefully you can see it's just about written local centre, which is that sort of grey purpley area. We've deliberately put it there, close to Southleigh Road, for greatest accessibility, both for new and existing residents. That's likely to comprise of local shops, cafe, community hall, that sort of stuff, for fitness classes, meeting rooms, co-working spaces, quite a lot in that community facility, health facilities, doctor surgery, possibly dentist. These are things we still need to work through, but these are things that we think are important in community building. A market square for local events, sitting out in the cafe. We also think what's quite cool is just to the right is an area of existing woodland that we could turn into a bike skills trail or a pump track. We think that's quite an unusual and quite distinctive, quite unique thing for this site and for this area. So the local centre is quite important, and it's quite important how you get there, and it's quite important that it's located in the right place. Just to the east of that is the farmyard area in the sort of centre of the site. Oh, that's it, perfect. I was doing that. Thanks, Rebecca. And that's a mix of retained barn buildings and new homes with very much a different type of character in that area, I think. Some of those retained buildings could be used for local workshop space, for example, additional co-working space for startups, small businesses, that sort of stuff. So that's again quite a unique and quite an interesting part to this site that we're keen, as I said before, to enhance and almost celebrate. And lastly, I suppose, is the school, which sits bang in the centre of the southern bit of the site, located there specifically to make sure that it actually fits on some of those traffic-free, attractive green corridors that will run through the site. We think that's an important part of the master plan, that point of accessibility, but also done in a sustainable way. And that school will be supported by a number of early years or nursery facilities, one in the south, one in the north, possibly one in the local centre. So there's lots more to this master plan than just 1,800 homes and lots of really beautiful public open space. Collectively, there's an awful lot in this plan that creates a genuine community for the people that live there and for the people like yourselves that live around it. So if we can imagine just for a second, I don't know if I should get up for this. I'll try. So if we can imagine for a second, we do this quite a lot in master planning. It's called a day in the life. So you're imagining living in this place. So if we can imagine, Rebecca, you go, perfect. Thank you. Is it the top one? So if we can imagine we sort of live in here somewhere. It's a Wednesday afternoon. It's sunny in the summer. We're going to go up our green corridor through here to get to the school to pick up our son and daughter. It's a beautiful corridor. It's tree lined, it's shady, it has benches, it has places that we can stop and talk to our neighbours. We get to the school up there where the entrance is, traffic free. Outside the school, we wait. Again, we sit on the bench. We're a bit early. So there's again a play area, one of many across the site. There's lots of planting. Again, it's a beautiful space. It's traffic free. So we decide when we pick up our son and daughter, we're going to head west to the local centre. The best thing about that is our daughter's brought her bike to school, so she can cycle traffic free to the local centre. Don't have to worry about cars, none of that. It's a beautiful journey, a proper cycle track. They're learning to cycle at the moment, so this helps. This is a place they can practice. It's a safe place they can practice. We get to the local centre. We think, what are we going to do? It's a beautiful Wednesday, sunny afternoon. Let's get why don't we have a hot chocolate in the square? The cafe is run by our neighbour, so we get it cheap, which is perfect. Our other neighbour comes from the farmyard area to meet us. She's got a small tailoring business over there in a small unit. So we speak to her for half an hour, then we decide, actually, wouldn't it be a great day to go to the park? This huge area of community parkland with its huge adventure playground, perfect for our son and daughter to have a brilliant afternoon in the summer before we decide to go back down this beautiful green route back to our house, probably for a well-earned cold beer after all of that. But what we're trying to do is just paint a picture of how great this place could be. I know we have one or two challenges and considerations, but I believe, and I think we all believe on this table, what a great place it can be. So can we go on to the next slide? So all of what I've just said, I suppose, is described and summarized in this slide, and a list of what we think are some incredible benefits that both new residents and existing residents will be able to take advantage of at Southleigh. That's an amazing new community park, an impressive and modern 3 form-entry school, and associated nurseries, locally beneficial uses such as community facilities, local employment, and as well as probably the two most significant things are 1,800 new high quality homes, many of which are affordable, and around 40% of the site dedicated to open space, recreation and wildlife. Next slide, please.
I'm conscious of time, so I'll try and keep this as short as I possibly can. So this is just our timeline of next steps. We intend to submit an outline planning application this year in the coming months, subject to the feedback we get from this process. Will be in the hands of the local planning authority once we've submitted that application. An outline, as many of you will know, it sets the parameters and the principle of development, so it doesn't fix the detail. That detail will come at a later stage through what's known as the reserved matters. Subject to the outline process and receiving a consent, securing a consent, we'd look to submit the reserved matters in phases thereafter. And we would target, again, subject to the planning process, a site start 2028. These are indicative timelines, so they are subject to that process, and that's the best we can give you in terms of an indication at this time. In terms of the build out, I mentioned this will be a phased development, so we'll be looking to bring this forward in phases over a period of at least 10 to 15 years. There isn't a development that would happen overnight. It would take some time to develop and build out, as is quite common practice with developments of this scale. I will conclude and hand back to the chair. Thank you.
So thank you to the Borough Homes team for their presentation. As a reminder, for anyone who's watching this at home or somewhere else via the live stream, all the materials from the Borough Homes presentation and everything that we've shown so far is available on the Havant Borough Council website. So you can look at the materials right now. So now I'd like to take the opportunity to invite representatives from community groups to speak. We have a total of 3 community groups represented here tonight. I will introduce each one in turn. As a reminder, representatives from community groups each have a total of 5 minutes to speak on the subject. I will give you a warning when we get to 30 seconds of your allotted time left, and I will ask you to finish promptly on time just so we can actually get through the entire agenda by 8 o'clock. So again, when you're speaking, can I ask that you speak into the microphone so that people listening on the live stream will be able to hear you speaking. So our first representative is Elizabeth Ems, the community representative from Denvilles. And your time will start, Elizabeth, once you've got the microphone and you start speaking.
Can everybody hear me? So thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Elizabeth Ems and I'm speaking on behalf of residents of Denvilles Havant regarding the proposed Southleigh development of 1,800 new homes. Generally, I think residents recognise that there is a need for additional housing, particularly social and affordable housing. However, it is vital that such a large development is supported by adequate infrastructure, without which the impact on surrounding communities will be severe. When Havant Borough Council consulted on the local plan, 35% of residents across the whole borough raised concerns specifically about the impact of the Southleigh development. This demonstrates just how significant and widespread these concerns are. At present, the proposed development only has 2 exits, both onto Southleigh Road and both north of the Warblington level crossing. This is already a heavily congested area, and without additional access routes, traffic conditions will worsen substantially. Over recent years, developments at Manor Farm, Nursery Fields, Normandy Way, Harbour View, and the houses at the corner of Southleigh Road and Horndean Road have added more than 800 new homes. These developments have already resulted in a significant increase in traffic and placed considerable pressure on the local road network. The Southleigh proposal would more than double their impact. Crucially, the Southleigh development includes no employment provision, meaning residents will need to commute out of the area for work. This will inevitably lead to a further substantial increase in peak time traffic. Congestion is compounded by the Warblington level crossing. Currently, there are around 12 trains per hour with long periods when the barriers are down. Only 2 of those trains stop at Warblington station, further extending the time the barriers are down. With an increased population at Southleigh, it is reasonable to assume that more trains will stop at Warblington, further increasing current delays. There have been numerous unsuccessful attempts in the past to work with Network Rail to reduce barrier downtime. And I think we must accept that Network Rail's priorities are safety and train punctuality. And it is therefore unlikely that this issue can be resolved in a way that meaningfully reduces congestion. In addition, Warblington School already places pressure on the road network during morning and afternoon peak times, further exacerbating traffic problems. So in conclusion, while residents can generally accept the principal development, there is a vital and non-negotiable need for supporting infrastructure. The infrastructure in the plan is vital that it is delivered. And in particular and vitally, residents also need to see clear provision for a spine road through the development and a link road connecting directly to the A27. Without these measures being included in the plans, the Southleigh development risks overwhelming the existing road network, increasing pollution, and significantly harming the quality of life for both new and existing residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Can I now invite Mr. Bateman from the Emsworth Residents Forum to speak? Again, your time will start once you have the microphone.
Thank you. My name is Mike Bateman, and I speak on behalf of the Emsworth Residents Forum. That's the successor body to the Neighbourhood Forum, which was established in 2014 to produce a neighbourhood plan. And this background is important since we were party to the public consultation, which has already been described tonight, and was funded by central government and included workshops in Emsworth, which led to the 2017 Emsworth Denville's draft master plan, which was drawn up by urban planners Levitt Bernstein. This was to be seen as a sort of strategic framework for the site, with the expectation that developers would take this as their starting point. We were able to support that plan since it proposed an infrastructure for the new development, which it matched the needs, and would enable the Emsworth community to coexist with it. And key to that proposal was the so-called spinal link road, which has already been described, which linked the new development to the primary road network, most obviously to the south and the A27. Without it, we had considerable concerns that Emsworth would be swamped by traffic generated by the new development seeking a route to the A27. That route would run down Horndean Road, New Brighton Road and North Street to the A259 for journeys east or west of Emsworth, but North Street is already a congested narrow route in the heart of Emsworth. It's part of the cycle network, but perceived to be unsafe for cyclists, especially where it narrows down to 2 restricted urban carriageways under the railway bridge. It's always been the intention of the Emsworth Forum to encourage active travel, including on the north-south route through Emsworth, but that aim is simply unattainable with any increase in traffic. The alternative north-south route from the recreation ground via the Washington Road underpass is not perceived to be a safe or feasible all-weather day and night route for cyclists. The contention that the new development would accord to the principles of Hampshire County Council's local transport plan, LTP4, and therefore there's no need for a new link to the A27 is dangerously complacent. Were we to be looking at a plan for a new settlement with an integration of residential and employment uses, then an argument for implementing that plan fully in this case and omitting the link road could be supported, but we're not looking at that. Few people who live in Southleigh would work there. Most would commute from there, some by public transport to Portsmouth or Chichester, but many to nodes of employment elsewhere, such as employers along the M27 or in Waterlooville further to the north, making journeys by public transport deeply unattractive, if not impossible. Emsworth is a commuter settlement, even in the last available census in 2021, which was unusual because of the 36% of people working from home in the pandemic. It showed that nearly 40% of those in employment but living in Emsworth commuted up to 30 kilometres each day. So we will have commuters using their cars to get from the new housing to their place of work and back, and it's naive to think otherwise. We've not seen any plans by Hampshire County Council to transition from the current common commuting patterns to a new model where commuting by private transport is dramatically cut. The local situation is made even worse by the very large number of new houses which have been permitted in the last 5 years along the A259 to the east of Emsworth. In that corridor, a very significant number of new homes have been consented or in the planning pipeline, with 1250 new homes in the Southbourne area alone. All of that brings greater pressure at the junction of North Street and the A259, even without the additional traffic being generated by Southleigh if no new link road is built. And it's our contention that this makes that element in the infrastructure an essential provision in order to ensure that the current road system can continue to operate safely and with reasonable efficiency. So our basic question for Bloor Homes is what traffic modelling was done to lead them to the conclusion that a link road, which was in the original master plan, could be omitted and was no longer required. And we'd be very interested in sharing that modelling at some stage in the future. Turning finally to the plans for the new development presented to date, we'd like to see evidence that in the early stages of the design, that the design principles associated with active travel environments have been fully embraced. We've heard some outline tonight of the way in which active travel is going to be, I think, encouraged was the word, but there needs to be a prioritization of pedestrians and cyclists over the private car, where routes to nodes of activity are direct for pedestrians and cyclists, but indirect and more tortuous for cars.
Thank you, Mr. Bateman. Can I ask you to finish now so we can allow plenty of time for everyone else to speak?
Yes, certainly. I'll finish at that point.
I'd now like to invite Mr. Comley from the Havant Civil Society to speak. And again, your time will start once you start speaking, Mr. Comley. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I too would like to paint a picture of a day in the life, but it's a day in the real life. The residents represented by councillors at this DCF live in and around the area shown on the map which forms the background to these slides. We experience these roads every day: the queues, the delays, the conflict points, the school run congestion, the evening peaks. This is our lived reality. It is unlikely that planning officers, the developer, or their consultants share that experience. That imbalance matters. Community engagement is essential, yet public input rarely influences decisions that feel predetermined. If this proposal proceeds to a planning committee, we may be granted a further 5 minutes to speak before conditions are confirmed. We may have a final 5 minutes if the developer returns with a Section 73 application to weaken or remove those conditions. Our experience shows that traffic conditions presented as safeguards are rarely enforced. In contrast, the developers, the borough planning officers, and the county highways officers enjoy continuous, detailed, and interactive access to one another. Their dialogue is ongoing. Ours is strictly time limited, with no scope for constructive elaboration. So I now want to focus on the single issue that determines whether this development can be assessed properly, and that is local road capacity. We have slide 2, David, please. This slide shows the only 4 routes connecting the A27 to the proposed Southleigh development. These are narrow residential corridors already at or beyond capacity. With no new SRN access proposed, all traffic related to these 1,800 new homes and to over 500 that David mentioned earlier, earmarked for Southleigh, must use these 4 routes. So the first question is simple: what else already uses these routes? Slide 3, please, Dave. This slide adds traffic movements from recent and committed developments in West Sussex and East Hampshire. These schemes, approved by neighbouring authorities, all load the same constrained network. Each has its own trip generation profile, but all compete for the same limited road space. Any transport assessment that treats these routes in isolation does not describe how the road network functions. Slide 4, please. This slide adds the final and most significant layer, the Amazon DP01 delivery station. Amazon's traffic is neither constant, verified, nor apparently enforced. The site's traffic already far surpasses the previous occupant, while operation is running at a fraction of its designed capacity. Amazon's 24/7 same-day delivery model is unique, dynamic, and flexible. Inbound and outbound vehicle movements are managed by third-party line haul and delivery service partners, supplemented by a flexible gig economy workforce using their own private cars. With no visible evidence of enforcement of the conditions on Amazon's permission, the true baseline is unknown. Without a reliable baseline, no cumulative impact assessment can be considered credible. Slide 5, please. Before I close, one further issue affects public participation. We may all submit comments during the consultation, but the delayed implementation of Havant Borough Council's new planning system makes that process harder and less transparent. For example, the system now forces the user to download documents previously been online. The previous Highline.
I think we have a point from Mr. Barton.
Please. For me, Mr. Comley, talking about the process by which we may manage an application is not the purpose of tonight. The focus is on Borough's development and not how and what systems we use when we're determining an application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barton. The 5 questions on screen go to the heart of whether the evidence base will be complete, the modelling credible, and the consultation lawfully and transparent. Chair, I ask that you request written responses to these questions from planning officers and the developer. I do not expect answers today, but they must be addressed before any assessment can be considered sound. Cumulative impact on the local road network cannot be understood, modelled or mitigated until the baseline is real, the data complete and the system ready. Until then, the evidence cannot be considered reliable and the proposal should not be published for formal consultation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Comley, and thank you to all those who spoke on behalf of their community groups. We will now move on to questions from councillors, and I would like to ask those who want to speak to put their hands up, and I will nominate you. There will be a roving microphone to come along. We have 1 hour for councillor questions. I will try and make sure that I'm even-handed in terms of who gets to speak, but please make sure that you do ask me a question. It's quite important, and that we maximise everyone's time. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I do want to thank Borough for providing this opportunity for us to talk. People will not always all agree with each other, but I think it's really important that we have the opportunity to share our concerns and issues and actually get into a dialogue about it. So I thank you for that. I've got 2 linked questions that are linked to what Mrs. Ems presented. And I'll just start by reiterating a couple of the points that she made. When we did the local plan, we were really struck by the fact that something like 35% of the responses talked about Southleigh. I'm talking there about a lot of people, not just who live very locally, but also people who live over in Waterlooville. And they're all talking because they are aware of, or the comments they're making are about transport and the impact on the transport system. So most of them were concerned about infrastructure and particularly the impact of increased traffic on the current road system. Now, as a councillor, and I'm a local councillor for this ward, it's my role to represent the views of my residents. You mentioned that there's 1,800 homes on this site. The ones that are mentioned on the previous slide, or one of the slides that showed the developments around it, and you can see a lot of them, that comes to nearly 800 homes, and that's already been loaded onto the system. Of those 800 homes, about 372 of them belong to the same owner of the Southleigh site. Now, cumulatively, that comes to 2,600 homes in or around this new development, and all of that's in the last 10 years. The impact of this extra housing will produce significant pressure on the transport system, and that's why our local plan is so important, because it enables us to make sure that things are developed with proper infrastructure, and that is really important here. So my question is, how do you propose that the cars of 1,800 homes will access the strategic road network when there is in effect only one entrance and exit to the main site, and every route shown on your plans depends on already congested roads?
Thank you, Councillor Monday. Can I hand that over to Borough to answer?
Hear me okay? Perfect. So we are very aware that this development will generate traffic. That's not something we're trying to hide away from. That is something we're accepting from the very outset. We have established a trip generation model that forecasts additional trips, and we are aware that in the peak period of the total movements from the development, we're forecasting around 55% of them will be as a car. Now, you are right in saying that we do have limited access points, but we do have Southleigh Road, Horndean Road, Barnes Road, and beyond. Now, we do acknowledge that these will need to, or some of these will need to access the strategic road network, and there are routes in place to do so. Our comprehensive set of surveys of the local area, as well as the key critical infrastructure points like Warblington level crossing will be established and incorporated into our full transport assessment that will be submitted as part of the application. We are going through the pre-application process with Hampshire County Council as the local highway authority, and agreeing with them numerous steps that we've taken to establish our vehicle trip generation, as well as our walking and cycling public transport generation. So agreement is ongoing. However, the full impact assessment will be submitted as part of the formal application.
Thank you. Councillor Money, do you have a supplementary question?
I do, thank you. Can I just make one comment? I have expressed to some of your colleagues my concern that when you do a transport assessment, it adequately reflects the issues, particularly in my area around the level crossing. And you've heard about the frequency of the trains, but also the impact of a wet day and a secondary school where lots of people come to collect their children. I don't think you do entirely realise quite how significant that is. However, most residents I speak to, and indeed most residents in this room, believe the only option to manage the traffic is to build a link road onto the A27, as was originally suggested when the site was first proposed in 2016. I, along with Councillor Lulu Barman, who's the county councillor, who's also here, we wrote to Steve Reed, the Secretary of State for MHCLG, asking for financial strategic support to resolve this problem, because we acknowledge that this is a big problem and it's not just, it will require additional funding in order to resolve it. But my question to you is, will you work with the council to ensure that adequate funds are raised to find an effective solution to this problem? And please, on your maps, clearly denote on any future plans a clear, reasonably straight road through the site that could be used as a link road. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Munday. Can I ask Blore to respond to those points?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. I would just like to establish that none of the proposals that we're suggesting have a direct access with the A27. I think we've been very clear with that. We fully appreciate that the master plan work that was undertaken in 2017 did consider this. That has been our starting point for all of these proposals. Now, since 2017, a lot has changed, both from a national policy point of view as well as a local policy point of view. There has been a move away from direct connections with the strategic road network unless entirely necessary. So I can appreciate your suggestion of entirely necessary and your suggestion of reaching out regarding funding. These proposals do not suggest that. However, if there is a subsequent requirement put in place by Department for Transport and National Highways, then that can be a subsequent consideration. But these proposals that we're presenting as part of the application forthcoming do not consider a direct link with the A27 as necessary.
Thank you. Can I just ask the room to remain quiet? I know tempers are going to get raised, but I do need to move back to councillor questions, please. Thank you. Councillor Collins.
Hello. It was from the Blore pack, the site context. It's one of the earlier maps. I'm sorry, you're looking at the back of my head, aren't you? Right, this one. OK, so thank you again for your presentation. I'm Councillor Sharon Collins. I'm a ward councillor for Lee Park Central and Westley. Been a resident here for 35 years. So like Councillor Munday, I've seen all the changes and all the impact, the same as our very excellent speakers this evening. So the draft local plan states in relation to this development, given the scale of the development proposed, significant infrastructure improvements will need to be delivered to make the new community sustainable and to
mitigate negative effects on existing communities. It goes on to say, accepting that vehicular access to Southleigh will be necessary alongside this active travel ensures that there is not an unacceptable impact on the existing highway network. That's in the local plan. So I imagine, and I know that you've heard this evening, you're aware of the recent consultation of the local plan, of which the majority of concerns and objections related to infrastructure, namely the roads, and the impact on the local traffic. Now, Havant frequently, including the last 2 days, I don't know if you look at Google Maps, it's been horrific. Havant frequently becomes gridlocked for several hours with summer traffic. So I'm just wanted to bring this map up here, because where we have, it's not just around here, we have the route down here for Hayling Island. Now, we all know that as soon as you get a beautiful sunny day, because they do happen, you get a little bit of traffic that goes to Hayling Island. It doesn't take very much. And what happens very quickly is the A27 heading east gets backed up. So everyone comes off because everyone's on the Google Maps.
That's
and they start to
appalling.
divert. Yeah.
Can we have a question, please?
We can, but it's very important that we understand, because if you're not local, you need to understand. So the traffic, the only route it can go, because it can't go through Havant, it can't go over the A27, it can't go anywhere else. The only way it can go is north. So it heads up the Petersfield Road, and the only way you can get through anywhere, if you're going to Emsworth or beyond, is via Barton's Road. So now your exit points for a lot of this estate is Barton's Road. The traffic trying to come from north, coming to south, anywhere near Emsworth.
Collings, just that question would be really great.
It's Horndean Road. Emsworth Common Road, it's all gridlocked. And for the last 2 days, it's been gridlocked. By 6 o'clock in the morning, it's been horrific. So, Warblington train gates are down for 15 minutes in excess of every single hour. Okay. And again, the traffic backs up horrific. We know, we live here. So here is the question. I did get there in the end. So how can it be possible for you to mitigate negative effects on existing communities and ensure that there is not an unacceptable impact on the existing highway network without a link road to the A27, when this site is encapsulated by the very roads that are instantly gridlocked? And how will you encourage National Highways, Hampshire Highways and Havant to secure access and funding to guarantee a link road if this development is to be sustainable and a serious proposal?
Thank you, Councillor Collins. So, Blore, would you like to answer that question?
Thank you for the question. Apologies. I'd just like to stick to the first point around mitigation, and I do appreciate that this will need mitigating, and that is enshrined within the local plan wording. Now, mitigation can come in numerous forms, and multiple key ones we're establishing as part of this development, including key walking and cycling movements, as well as to enable those shorter distance trips and make them direct and immediately accessible, rather than needing to jump into the local your private vehicle. And there are numerous amenities within the local area within that walking and cycling distance that we are looking to promote from the very outset. Now, for longer distance trips, mitigation will be proposed as part of the bus services. We understand the 27 runs very infrequently, and in order to mitigate the impact of the development, we're looking to emphasize these public services as best as possible, promoting them from the outset, improving their frequency, not just of the E27, but also of the new service provided as part of the development proposals. Now, beyond that, there is to be highway mitigation proposals at localized junctions. That is within the draft local plan wording, as well as supported by the national and county-wide policy wording. So we are looking to mitigate. There is no ignoring the fact but we're looking to mitigate it through that hierarchy of movement as best as possible.
Thank you. You did have quite a long time, and we're 15 minutes in. We've got quite a lot of councillors to go. If we've got time at the end, Councillor Collins, I'll invite you to come back. Thank you. Councillor Raisin.
Thank you very much. I'm Gráinne Raisin, and I am an ward councillor for Emsworth. And as you've seen on the map, Emsworth is going to be impacted because this site is to the north and to the east. Emsworth is to the north and to the east. I'm going to say to Blore, you'll be relieved to hear my question is not about traffic, because I think that's had a pretty good airing and some excellent and clear explanations of the problems. I was a little while ago sitting with the Hampshire planners, and they were saying how frustrated they were that developments put cars first and that active travel comes second. And that was what they were saying, because they were looking at how can they improve active travel. So I'd be interested to see Hampshire's input on that. I'm not going to say again, but this is not a meeting for asking questions that relate to national planning policy or even local planning policy for that matter. This is a scoping exercise. It's for Blore to hear residents' concerns so that when they make their application, they are clear about what they're like. So many residents have spoken to me, and their frustrations are very, very clear. And it is around the traffic, and it is around why there's no road planned. And this has already been said. So the plan is obviously very ambitious. It looks lovely, really pretty pictures. The things that control what happens in planning are central and they're not local. And what I'm going to ask about is the community assets, and in particular the GP surgeries, because this is what everybody here knows, that GP services are very, very stretched. And we recently, last week, we had the example where Bearwood, which is to the north of here, where Granger are building, and they built over 1,200 homes, and they haven't had a GP surgery as yet, and they're wondering why. Now, I'm going to suggest that perhaps this, despite what is drawn on the pictures, is not actually really in the gift of developers, because the NHS doesn't fund GP surgeries, and to build a GP surgery is actually up to £1 million and probably another $1 million to fit it out. And GP practices do not have that kind of money, and they'll not be able to raise that, and that's possibly why. But however, given that that is what the situation is, I would ask Blore if they could explain what they will do, and will this be more than just a land allocation for a surgery?
Thank you, Councillor. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So as I explained, the outline planning application will establish the principles of the uses that we would seek to incorporate. You're right, we can provide the spaces and we can allow the uses. We as an organisation cannot bring the doctors. Ultimately, it's the NHS and how they fund and deliver those uses, but we can certainly enable the space and try and encourage and work with those providers to try and make sure they come forward. Ultimately, any outline application will have a series of triggers within it, which will define when the infrastructure is necessary and the uses, etc., come forward. And that's something that is to be determined during the application process. So those are unknown at this point in time. They cannot be known until we've worked through the full impact of the development and fully understood it. But we are intending to propose those GP and healthcare uses, and we would very much like to see those come forward. We do not want to see empty spaces. We want to see spaces and uses that are ultimately brought forward and are sustained and last within the community, so they don't end up empty. But it is a challenge, and it's one that we see across many of our developments.
I didn't allow Councillor Collins a supplementary, so I think I'm going to have to be equal on this. We'll come back, and we'll move on to another councillor and we'll come back. Councillor Berwick.
Oh, is that on? You can hear me. Okay, there might be a theme to this.
So I agree, obviously, with everything people have said so far about travel. I just wanted to add to that I am meeting with some of the Chichester councils to work out their building proposals at the moment. One of the stark pieces of information I have at the moment that is yet to be fully verified, but I believe is accurate, is along the A259 corridor. There's about 11,500 homes that's going to be built across there, mostly between Havant and Chichester. So during your surveys, are you taking a holistic and future-looking approach to how you look at this, considering the very large amount of traffic that's going to be put on both the Fishbourne roundabout and the roundabouts south of Southleigh, south of Denville's? Are you taking a holistic look at that? Are you considering future builds that are in planning for neighbouring authority areas? And doesn't this really push the need for that A27 link road?
Thank you, Councillor Berwick.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. Any assessment that we take into account is a fully cumulative impact assessment. This considers the local plan of Havant, Chichester and any other local neighbouring authorities, as well as their forecast growth that's committed as their proposals, whether that's developments along the A259 specifically or in other areas beyond just this localised area. So in short, yes, the transport assessment submitted will have a future year assessment year. That is the year that the development is forecast to be fully built out and will be completely comprehensively assessed with localised developments like the ones mentioned earlier around Cold Harbour Farm Lane, as well as wider developments beyond just Havant, but also into the Chichester, West Sussex area as well.
Thank you. Can the councillors raise their hands so I can see? Thank you very much. Councillor Horton.
Thank you, Chair. Can everyone hear me? As much as I'd like to talk about bus services and transport, and I'm not going to for the moment, might come back to that, but Havant's got a long waiting list for housing among residents. Developers will always build houses that can make the most profit for them because that's what they're in the business of doing. They're not in the business of looking at the local housing need. That's for the council to determine. But what is the mix of housing you've got in place? You talked about the site, but not about the housing you're actually going to build there. How many 1 to 2 bedroom houses, which we're short of in the borough, are you going to be building? What sort of discounted schemes will there be for local residents to buy housing in the area? Because very often we see a development being built that prices local residents out of purchasing properties. So is there a scheme for Havant residents to get onto the area and build and buy, get onto the property ladder and buy houses in the area? So that's it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horton. For Blair.
So in terms of mix of homes, we would seek to provide a range, and we don't know the precise quantum of that mix yet because it isn't defined, and it will respond to market conditions and need and affordability at the time. We will be required to meet the emerging, once it becomes allocated, the affordable housing policy of Havant, whatever level that is established at. And that obviously responds to specific housing needs in terms of those on the housing waiting register. We could offer custom build, self-build homes. Those are other needs that the emerging policies may bring forward, but ultimately we'll be looking towards that emerging policy to inform our proposals as they come forward at the detailed stage. Typically, the council has a housing market assessment, and that is a detailed analysis of the level of need in terms of market and affordable. And again, that gives us a good indication as to the sort of properties that we should be bringing forward within the local area. So it's a mix of factors. It's not yet known, but we'll be looking to be compliant with the affordable housing requirements as they come forward within the local plan as the starting point.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you. I'm one of the local councillors here, and for my sins, I drove the 27 bus for 10 years, so I share everyone's frustration about the Southleigh Road and waiting 15 minutes for 5 trains. But Rebecca, you said at the start that you wanted to generally engage with us, and that engagement has to go 2 ways, of course. And I listened to lots of people out there earlier, and it is actually all about the infrastructure. And I know as a bus driver driving down that road that the only way you can help the residents of Warmington and Denvilles is to have the link road onto the motorway. That was how it was almost sold to us in 2017, and you've earmarked for development every possible place on the development site that could actually go over this spine road, which is most desperately needed. And I noticed enhancements to roundabouts. They did that with Asda roundabout, and as soon as there's a problem with the wider road network, people are stuck in Asda's for an hour and a half. We all know what happened. Was it yesterday on the road? Yeah, it took my son an hour and 45 minutes to get from Chichester back to Havant. But how can, the question is, how can you future-proof the infrastructure that would help the residents of Warmington and Denvilles? And my other question is, who's going to pay for the bus?
Thank you. I'm going to start and then hand over to Max. So I'm a planner, I'm not a transport planner, but I just think it's worth acknowledging that there has been a national policy shift since this site was originally put forward under the last local plan. That is quite key because the government is now not looking to invest, whether you agree with this or not, this is the position. They're not looking to increase capacity at major road junctions. What they're looking to do is bolster alternative modes of travel, be that public transport, walking and cycling. So the fundamental principles and the evolution of this master plan has been underpinned by the technical work we've done, which is different and new because it wasn't undertaken at the time of the last master planning exercises that were undertaken. And we're not looking to ignore that work. That's really good work that we've looked to build on using our own technical diligence. But the master plan has evolved with active travel corridors as a core principle to try and achieve a modal shift. Now, I totally understand that there's scepticism about that modal shift. That is a national principle that the government is now working to, and that's what we need to respect in terms of the national policy position. So that is a fundamental change that I think is worth just explaining, whatever your view on that in terms of a principle. Oh, I should mention the bus. In terms of the bus, any active travel services that we'd be seeking to commit, we would have to sign up to how they would be delivered to ensure they remain sustainable. So that could include some pump priming, is what we call it, some early payments to make sure that happens. The timing of any new infrastructure, such as a bus service, is key, because clearly we don't want an empty bus rattling around a development that won't be used, but equally it needs to come in at the right time to ensure that you get a shift in behaviour. So again, this is all to be determined, and it's key in terms of a major development such as this, but we will be looking to have to commit to some funding towards any modal shift that we believe we can demonstrate as part of our active travel plan. And that would then be monitored by the county accordingly. And that's standard practice. But this new vision and validate is the new concept that the government's working to, is for us to demonstrate that that's workable and that the impact on the network is not severe. That is the test that the county and the local planning authority will be assessing alongside input from National Highways.
So I'll just come in and just back up that point about future-proofing buses that you mentioned, that, as Rebecca mentioned, there will be some level of pump priming. However, a key facilitator of these bus services that we're proposing is that they are not just for Southleigh residents. They will benefit existing communities over in Emsworth, up on Barton's Road, and beyond. And that's a key addition to kind of allowing that funding to go forward and ensure that they are future proof, that there is fair and revenue generated by the services, not just from the Southleigh development itself, but by existing businesses, that new services and improved service will help improve the wider transport connection of the area.
Thank you. I'm going to take Councillor Roberts next, but can I just say we have spent a lot of time focusing on transport. I do understand why people are very concerned about that, but if you could have a think about your questions, if anyone has a burning question on something that's not transport related, we only have 30 minutes left. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Charles Robert. I'm representing the Emsworth ward. My question is going to be related to habitat, so it'll be different. Many of the residents in Havant tell us that open spaces and wildlife are very important to them. This area that's been identified here, this is an area that provides fantastic habitat for resident organisms and animals. And it also provides a corridor, which is very important for other animals to pass through. We've got bats, we've got owls, there are dormice, there are, well, probably not dormice, but there are definitely slow worms, and we've got a resident sort of population of deer. So what I really want to get to is my question is, what are you going to do in terms of protection to ensure that the during construction, which as we've heard is likely to be between 10 and 15 years, what sort of protection is going to be in place for ensuring that the resident population is not damaged or hurt or affected in any way? And on top of that, once things are all complete, what will be the permanent means by which the corridors will remain open? And it's obviously going to be a very important area for humans to enjoy the open space, but what can you do to ensure that there will be some privacy, some sanctuary for the wildlife? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So a few points to pick up there, but this is a very strong scheme from a biodiversity perspective. It will be tested using the statutorily prescribed methodology for BNG, and we expect it to very comfortably exceed the minimum statutory requirements. It's obviously important to acknowledge the BNG assessment is concerned with habitat specifically rather than species, but it's intended by DEFRA to be a proxy measure for biodiversity in general. So if we're doing the right things for BNG, for habitats, we're also doing the right things for most other assemblages of species. So we can confidently predict that most of those assemblages you mentioned will have a long-term positive outcome as a result of the proposals. If you look at things like amphibians, reptiles, for example, which you mentioned, the quality and quantity and connectivity of the habitat post-development will be very significantly enhanced from the baseline. Large parts of the site for those groups of species are essentially a desert, really, and there'll be expansive and well-connected new areas of semi-natural grassland, scrub, wetland features, which will benefit those. During construction, those features can be protected using standard good practice measures. Currently, the reptiles, for example, they're really eking out a living around the margins of the current intensive arable use. So you mostly find them at the interface between the fields and people's back gardens in a very narrow margin. Those areas are going to become much more generous and better connected, better managed buffers. But during construction, to a large extent, they can be managed, they can be maintained and protected in situ. In other cases, they can be translocated to other well-established parts of the site. But it's there's really no concern on my behalf about those sorts of impacts. There are a few species, particularly adapted to farmland, that would be exceptions. So, for example, ground nesting farmland birds, skylark. Realistically, those can't be mitigated within the confines of a residential development. You get the odd skylark territory in a large area of wildflower meadow managed as open space, but it will never be as good as a big open arable field because those are the conditions they like. But that's something that can be easily mitigated off-site through tested methods like providing skylark plots. The decline in farmland birds isn't because there's a shortage of arable land. It's because in the last few decades, there's been a real intensification of agricultural practices, shifts in the timing of crops, increasing use of pesticide. So that's the cause of the decline. That's the reason why those species are of concern. Deer are mentioned in your question as well, and they come up a lot. And understand that it's a population of animals which people have, is of emotional value to people, and people appreciate having a view of deer. But that doesn't mean that they're of great importance from a technical perspective, realistically. So all our deer species are abundantly common and widespread in the UK. And in fact, the overpopulation of deer in this country is one of our major problems for biodiversity. It's a big problem for the quality and condition of our woodlands. It's implicated in the decline of a lot of woodland species, hazel dormice, woodland butterflies, nightjars, nightingales. So yes, we accept there'll be less deer activity on site simply because there won't be lots of arable crops for them to eat anymore. But that doesn't constitute a significant ecological impact. And so from an ecological perspective, that's not really material in the decision-making framework within which we're working.
Thank you. Councillor Oliver, do you have a question?
I'd like to thank Borough for their presentation and acknowledgement of some of the, sorry. Yes. And hello? Yes, good. Closer? Yes. I'd like to acknowledge that Borough's proposals do include a lot of nodding towards critical issues which should concern us. I believe that we have a huge opportunity here to envisage a village environment, a pedestrian village, which would serve all the housing needs of the borough, the profile of those needs. And what I'm very disturbed about is that this is another development which is based on the car and the unit of a single home. We need a more imaginative approach. We need to build higher. We need to make sure that the village is entirely a pedestrian village, and that it has a full spectrum of services which would diminish its impact on the surrounding area and the impact on the population which already exists there.
Councillor Oliver, could I ask you to frame it as a question? So
the question is that can we revisit this whole proposal and look at alternative approaches so that some of these concerns can be met and the actual needs of the Havant residents can be served rather than a uniform method of housing people. There are other alternatives which definitely need proper consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think summarising, it's about density.
So I think the question is the density of development and making most efficient use of land, which clearly is critical in terms of developing a site and bringing it forward. And that's something we obviously look at carefully. This wouldn't just be a uniform form or pattern of development. There would be pockets of higher density, potentially slightly higher areas, certainly around the local centre, for example. There would be a mixture of flats, but there would be some family homes. We're looking to respond to the mix of needs that are existing. I don't think we'd sit here and say it'd be appropriate to cover the whole development or the whole area in high-rise development. I don't think the community would welcome that either, but clearly it's striking the right balance and achieving the right mix to meet the needs of the community.
Thank you. Councillor Gray, can I ask you to speak? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Philippa Gray, Ward Councillor for Bedhampton. We've talked about the impact on Central Havant and Emsworth. I just want to widen your vision. When drivers get stuck in traffic, they don't sit patiently waiting for the queues to dissipate. They try to find another route, and we know all about this in Bedhampton. We're regularly getting clogged up whenever there's local problems. So I would ask Blore to take a wider look at both the effect of traffic displacement and also consider the fact that we've got a major development in the shape of Havant Thicket Reservoir, which is generating a lot of local traffic at the moment, which will be going on for years. And I predict the whole of Havant will simply grind to a halt very, very regularly and possibly never untangle itself.
Do you have a question?
Yeah. Would Blore look wider than just Central Havant, look further west and north to the rest of the borough and consider the impact whenever they're putting together mitigation?
Thank you.
Very best for me to come in on this one. Appreciate your question, Councillor Gray. That our scope of assessment work, especially from a transport and highways impact point of view, is established very early on with the local highway authority, and we have a specific cordon of junctions and assessments and impacts that we look at, and that is formally agreed through the pre-application process with the local highway authority. Now, if there are impacts beyond that, as you say, we as a development proposal can only forecast impacts so wide. If it goes much beyond, as you say, into Bedhampton, as you say, that is a consideration for the highway authority themselves. We as an applicant and an application impact process take it to a certain extent that is formally agreed.
Thank you. Conscious of time, we are scheduled to close at 8 o'clock. So I'm going to take any final councillors that haven't asked a question, then I'll move on to follow up questions from people who haven't, who have supplementary questions. So I think Councillor Hagan and Councillor Harrison have not yet asked a question. Oh, and
Hi, yes, my question is concerning mitigation for flooding on the site and its effects on, or potential effects on neighbouring properties. So SUDs are being used to potentially manage the areas for flooding from groundwater. Houses in similar sites with similar groundwater problems are built on raised platforms, and then neighbouring houses then have raised groundwater on their properties. My question is, what mitigation is going to be in place to prevent its impact on neighbouring properties as well as the actual site itself? And just to supplement that, who will be responsible for ongoing maintenance of these SUDs once once the site has been fully developed and moved on? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hagan. Blore?
Thank you, Councillor. I think there's two questions there. If I start on the flooding, you may notice from any flood mapping that you may have looked at that there are areas in the south of the scheme. We have done modelling of this through different software, and that's identified the extent of that in the current scenario. We need to mitigate that to reduce any impact we have on our residents who may be moving in and the local surrounding neighbours. We're proposing to do that by increasing the size of the watercourse along the western boundary. I would point it out. Yeah, just through there. So by widening that watercourse, you create the capacity and it will not flood over in extreme events. We have modelled it up to the 1 in 1,000 year storm event. So that's the worst that could possibly happen between now and the next 1,000 years, including climate change. Moving on to SUDS maintenance, there's two options that we can move forward with, either through the highway authority or through a management company that we would appoint ourselves. At the moment, the preference would be towards the highway authority taking them on, but that would be something that's defined at the reserve matters stage.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison?
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Antonia Harrison from Purbrook Ward, which is in Waterlooville. Waterlooville has a similar size development at Burwood, and over the years there have been similar questions, and there still are similar questions because it's still in development. So it's an interesting exercise to look at this one alongside what's still going on or not going on, should I say, at Burwood. Anyway, my question really relates to actually the Wellbourne developments, which is what a 25-year project, and the fact that a bridge was built at Junction 10 on the M27 with very little inconvenience over the Christmas holidays. So, how about it?
A short answer, because we have covered transport an awful lot.
Thank you. Thank you for your question, Councillor Harrison. We are very aware of Wellbourne as a development. That development was submitted in 2017 when the national and local policy had a different picture. It was then subsequently approved in 2019, still under a prior policy agreement. Wellbourne is considerably larger than the Southleigh proposal. It's around 6,000 houses. We're only 2,000. They were also able to facilitate direct access off the M27 at Junction 10 with alterations to the existing slip road arrangement. Southleigh is of a different scale. The A27 is of a different scale to the M27, and we do not have an immediate Junction 10 to work with.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison.
Do you mind if I interject just to add something further, just to respond to the question? Clearly, the sustainability credentials are really important. Many authorities have declared climate change emergencies. We've got to consider the impact of developments as they're coming forward, to include the impact from a carbon perspective of major infrastructure, such as road junctions, etc. We've done some initial analysis on new junctions, and the impact of them in terms of that carbon impact is considerable. And that is something that should weigh in the balance of a material planning decision. I think Adam had some calculations of the impact of a potential structure in terms of trees, but that has to be factored into the balance.
Thank you, Councillor Faes, and then I'll try as much as I can to get the follow-ups.
I'm Councillor Mnaza Faiz from the ward of Lee Park Central and Westlea, and my question is, what will be the proportion of these 1,800 houses will be genuinely affordable and, you know, social housing? Thank you.
Thank you.
I touched on this earlier. We would look to the emerging planning policy position, which our current understanding is 30% affordable homes, which would respond to the housing needs register. So people on that register would be able to either purchase a shared ownership property or have a property that could be available for social rent, affordable rent. But it depends what the emerging policy actually clarifies ultimately.
Thanks. I've got one councillor left who hasn't asked a question yet, and I think what I might have to do is to kind of do a quick whip round, find out what all your questions are and manage it that way, because we are literally supposed to be closing in 7.5 minutes. So Councillor Holes.
Hi, I'm Councillor Jonathan Hulls from Hayling Island. My question is a bit of a supplementary to Councillor Oliver's, really. He was getting at the fact that it would be nice to have a whole pedestrian village. There's been a lot of talk of the active travel alleviating traffic on the surrounding roads. So would you as Borough be happy to cut down the amount of parking per unit? Because what we often see is developers bringing forward plans, talking about active travel, and then all the units end up with 2 car parking spaces and everyone has 2 cars. If you didn't provide that, it would encourage people to use the active travel more.
Thank you, Councillor Holes. Borough, thank you.
Ultimately, we're guided by Havant's parking standards. So if there was a desire from a council's perspective to change the approach to parking, to encourage people not to park or to move away from having a second car, for example, that would be set at the borough level, because we need to respond to the policies that they put in place.
Thank you. I think that's everyone that has wanted to ask a question, has asked a question. I'm going to figure out how I can. So Councillor Mundy, Councillor Raisin, Councillor Berwick and Councillor Collins have all had their hands up for a long time. We'll try to get through you all. Should we do it in the order that everyone spoke? So Councillor Raisin wants to follow? Okay, Councillor Raisin first.
Thank you very much. To be brief, Southern Water are mandated to connect properties to the sewerage network. Bud Farm is said to be at capacity. What indication from Southern Water has Bloor Homes had that the final build out of the estate and that of the 800 homes on the Horndean Road and the potential 2,000 additional homes will be within the capacity of Bud's Farm to treat that sewage?
Thank you for a very quick question.
Would you like a quick answer as well?
I would love one, thank you.
We are engaging with Southern Water. They've identified the same issues that you have around Bud's Farm. There is capacity in the local network for the initial parcels to get away, and then we will build out over lifetime, and our infrastructure charges, which are a fee approximately £1,000 per property, will be used to fund reinforcement of the Southern Water network.
Thank you. Councillor Mundy.
A couple of points. Firstly, when you came to see me, I asked specifically, could I talk to you? Could you talk to me about how you were doing your transport assessment? I was quite disappointed that you never came back, because I was explaining at that time that there are very specific pressure points on our system. And the question is whether you're doing your assessments at the right time. And I'd like to be clear about that. So I'd like to know that. Secondly, nobody's mentioned the fact that up the road, about a mile away, just north of the Thicket Reservoir, you're building 800 homes yourselves. That's Bloor Homes. So that will impact on this system as well. So I'm concerned that I offered you the opportunity to work with us to find solutions to problems, whether that be a link road or whatever. The answer I got, or I didn't get an answer. Now, I was prepared to ring up and contact the Secretary of State, because I think that that's this important for this borough. And I was unhappy with your answer. So I ask you again, are you prepared to work with us as a local council to look for solutions to the traffic problems that everybody's been talking about and you've poo-pooed? Please.
Thank you, Councillor Mundy.
I'd just like to say that we have, through our transport assessment, tried to be collaborative. We held workshops with Havant Borough Council, I believe it was November, December 2024, and those discussions have now led into where we are with the current transport proposals. Similarly, those transport proposals through the couple of years of pre-application have been discussed with Hampshire County Council, and those have been put forward and discussed further. And in terms of our transport assessment methodology, that has similarly been discussed at length with the local highway authority to understand their position on it and their buy-in, and ensuring that it is in line with local policy and what they want to see as a highway authority.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. With 3 minutes left.
One, it was either estate management fees or solar panel. So I think I might choose solar panels. Right, so we've heard this whole site is going to be all electric. That's what I've heard, right? That's what you've told us. So if the site is all electric, each property has a heat pump. Average use in the winter for 21 degrees, about 40 kilowatts a day, every single day, 40 kilowatts per each house. Now, my maths for 2,100 homes, because that's what it ends up being, 84,000 kilowatt hours every single day will have to be produced just for those heat pumps before we plugged in all of our EV chargers. But I think we're all riding bikes, people, so it'll be all right. Now, To generate 84,000 kilowatt hours per day, perhaps an offshore wind turbine would take 2 to 3 days to produce that, right? 1 day's usage. To generate that per day, perhaps using solar panels, 500 watt, decent sized solar panels, you would need approximately 33,600 to 56,000 panels, depending on the location, the amount of peak sunlight hours available. So each home would have to be south-facing, with a south-facing roof, accommodate 16 to 20 500-watt panels, and have battery storage to get
Councillor
anywhere near
Collins,
that.
given
So the
fact it
question is,
now 8 o'clock. Thank you.
given Havant Borough Council's strategy for net zero and sustainability, will Borough be looking to install solar and battery storage in all these properties to reduce the reliance on the grid and promote sustainability?
Thank you.
Thank you.